New York City. The city has 400 years of known history. As of right now, the population is more than 8.5 million, covering about 300 square miles of land. Most people are familiar with New York after the European conquest. But what was New York City before it was known as New York City? Join me as we explore this ancient land that was once known as Lenapeoking. Inwood, earliest history record, goes back as far back as 17,000 years. In New York City, there is little evidence of civilization that existed on this land before the Europeans took over. 28,000 years ago, the world was experiencing the Ice Age. "17,000 years ago, the Ice Age in New York was coming to an end. Large chunks of rocks and ice slid, melted, and collided on top of each other. All while forming this land as we know it today. For years, New York was built on top of this solid bedrock. But on the northern tip of Manhattan, there lies unbuilt land that still exists today. Today, we know it as Inwood Hill Park. In the early 20th century, the Europeans have discovered some pottery, stone tools, and other equipment used by the people who live here in this shelter. These caves were used to keep people warm during the cold winter season. To the indigenous, these caves were known as paladine.
Because Aden means a big hill, which it is, and Pen means steep, and Ik means place. So it's very straightforward. It's a steep hill place, Penadnik. So the colonists learned it as Penadnik. Okay, so that's that mountain that's on the west side of, in what is now called Inwood Hill Park.
The people that lived in these caves that were left here by the Ice Age long ago were part of the Lenape. But what is Lenape?
Ordinary people or common people, or the real people. But it's also a word that makes sense in a large area.
Now, let's take a look at the caves inside. Okay, we're almost there. Come on in. This is one cave right over here. We're going to enter this cave. Imagine we're still here in New York City and I'm inside a cave. And it goes pretty deep. There may not be a TV here, but it is convenient enough to stay warm during the wintertime. Many would have referred to this land as Lenapeoking.
Lenapeoking I think would be better, Lenapeoking. And that's a controversial term with some people because, again, it has Lenape in it. So some people would assume that was from a later time. And Hoking would be basically the place of the land of. And Haki is a land or territory usually, but Haki could also refer to Mother Earth. So you can see how those could be assimilated together. But Lenape Haki would be the land of the Lenape, but Lenapeoking would be even more specific, like this land. And yet the question is how old would that term be? But that refers to a large area, including most of New Jersey, parts of Pennsylvania, and all up the Hudson could all be Lenapeoking, and Manhattan and Long Island.
If you ever wondered where the word Manhattan came from,
Manhattan. Manhattan means Rocky Islands, or Manhattan, Rocky Island where people live. And Manhattan are the place of the people of the Rocky Islands, or the people of the place of the Rocky Islands. And so Manhattan, there's that Rocky Island. Owak is like the people, and Manhattan is what it's in the middle of, a land of Rocky Islands.
according to legend, right here on this very spot here in Inwood Park, Peter Mew made that deal with the natives.
So he arrived in November of 1626 to treaty with the Rechgawawank. They were part of the Wappingers Confederacy. And my understanding is they had some control over the upper part of Manhattan, whereas the Mattoac of Long Island had control over the lower part through the Canarsie tribe or nation. And so in between, there was some border, we don't know where it is, but he met with them. He had already tried to meet, according to the tale, with the Canarsie, and it didn't work out. So he went to, the 60 guilders story. You may have heard that he supposedly bought Manhattan for 60 guilders, but it's unlikely. That's about the price of a pig.
The thing about the deal was that both parties were from two different worlds. The natives were not materialistic. They didn't understand the way the Europeans traded. At first, the natives believed that they were trading gifts of good faith with the intention of sharing. The idea of property and ownership, it wasn't understood by the natives. It wasn't part of their society. It wasn't their way of life. A few feet away from the cave, right across from the clove, we're still able to find some artifacts. There's a small team in the park that try to preserve the indigenous culture by replicating their way of life. The reason for this documentary is because, to my understanding, the Europeans were escaping from their side of the world because of pollution, greed, and a hardship way of life. The natives here were comfortable. Their way of life suited them. They were happy for the most part. Perhaps even happier than the Europeans were. And in my opinion, that's what we need to learn from history. We need to understand a little bit more about them so we can have a better future.